Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Brandon.
And today we're going to tell you how we felt about Godzilla. Brandon, finally, an American-made Godzilla film, and it doesn't frickin' suck.
Absolutely.
Yeah, how excited am I about this?
You're very excited.
I'm very excited. How excited are you about this?
Extremely excited. Yes!
Is that how excited you are?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So like on a level of 1 to 10, you're like an 8 or 9. Okay. Anyway, so Godzilla is a film about Godzilla, yeah. So we have, it's basically a sequel, as a lot traditionally, as I've been told and read, a lot of, because by the way, I'm not a huge Godzilla expert or anything. I've seen a couple here and there, and primarily my knowledge of Godzilla comes from the original 1954 Gojira, not the American remake, but the actual subtitled original Godzilla.
Gotcha.
And a lot of the Toho movies are apparently sequels to that movie, where that's the only thing canon and they leave everything else out. And this movie does exactly that. It's a sequel to that. So all the background from the 1954 movie is here, and then everything else is kind of wiped, you know, the slate is wiped clean. So this is a direct sequel to that movie, which is really exciting, again, for me, because that's pretty much my knowledge anyway. so you know, I feel like I'm watching this great sequel to a movie that I've seen. But anyway, and don't have to worry about any of the other stuff. There is a character at the beginning played by Bryan Cranston, who has spent the last several years trying to figure out what happened to his wife, because she was killed, and while they were investigating this stuff with like electromagnetism and stuff, and they didn't know what in the world was going on, and he for years and years, while everybody thinks he's crazy, is trying to figure out what exactly happened, and he happens upon finally kind of the story of Godzilla and these monsters.
That's right.
And that's pretty much what the setup is. Brandon, how'd you feel about Godzilla?
This movie made me feel like, oh my Godzilla. Indeed, this movie was, for a Godzilla movie, I didn't feel this was over the top. I felt it was enough for the guys at Godzilla here. We had these huge monsters that feed off radioactivity that just makes them monstrous monsters, if you will, and they go to battle in these huge metropolitan areas, and they just destroy everything, much like you would expect a Godzilla movie to be. I very much enjoy this because, like you, I don't have much of, well, I have even less of a background in Godzilla than you. I really enjoyed.
Oh, you got to at least watch the original.
Oh, I know, and I've always played. I've always wanted to, and I just keep putting it off. Now I've got to.
Yeah.
I very much enjoyed this kind of story where we get back in the 50s. The Godzilla is kind of discovered, and then the nuclear tests are there as a guise to try to kill Godzilla, but they don't exactly know what they're going with. And then the whole story with the mine and releasing these other entities that Godzilla then has to fight.
Yeah.
In essence, it was a storyline I wasn't familiar with, and I should have been, but I really enjoyed that. In the end, this was a story, I think, about humanity kind of has to learn a lesson about nature, and that's kind of told us through one of the Japanese professors in this movie. And
played by Ken Watanabe, who's always awesome. And
yes.
That was one of the things that got me really excited about this movie. Is Ken Watanabe,
very definitely awesome.
You're gonna have to have a major Japanese character in this movie. Can he be played by Ken Watanabe? Can that happen? Yes, thank you.
Absolutely,
fantastic.
One of the things that I didn't like about this movie, and I don't want to give too much away, was how quickly one of our main characters kind of disappeared from this movie. That was the one thing I wasn't sure about. In the end, I thought this movie was absolutely excellent. It had, what a soundtrack this movie had.
Yeah, man. The score is brilliant.
The score was great, but also the sounds made by the monsters.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Well, and that's a staple. You've got to get that right.
You've got to get it right, but even with the fact that ultimately the sounds aren't so loud they're going to kill your eardrums, but the force behind the sounds just gives you the great power and
in our
awe.
theater, it shook the seats.
It really did.
That was cool.
It was wonderful. Just the attention to that type of thing. And let me just say, for the visual effects in this movie, it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So I'm gonna have to say, I'm definitely feeling it. This is one for the movie theater. Don't miss it in the movie theater.
I agree with that, yeah.
How did you feel?
Well, I'm going to go with kind of the old obvious cliche with this and say I felt like, with a slight twist, I felt like I was riding on a really fun, often human-driven roller coaster. And that kind of encapsulates everything I felt about this, because as a disaster-ish kind of picture, a lot of times what you get is focusing on human characters that are kind of shoehorned into a really contrived kind of situation. And here, not only did I care about the human characters, not only did I like them and found them sympathetic and was interested in what they were going through and thought that there was some really good thematic stuff about family and about loss and about what people, like people throwing away their lives just in pursuit of the truth. I thought there was a lot of like really sad, tragic stuff there, and I cared about it. And
absolutely.
Not only did I get all of that, but also the film didn't feel manufactured. It didn't feel like those characters were just at the center of it because those were the people that the movie chose to focus on, because we have to have somebody. Movies are about people. A lot of time, movies, you know, you look at stuff like what is that movie? Like War of the Worlds, the remake from the early 2000s,
sure.
Where I didn't buy that it made any sense that we were following Tom Cruise over anybody else in that.
Exactly.
You know, you get things like what is that movie with The Day After Tomorrow, where you know like it gets that done a little bit better, but it does that a little better, but I'm still sort of like, I don't know, there's a couple of characters, I don't know why we're following these people, or I don't really care that we're following. In this movie, we're following the people that it makes the most sense to follow.
Absolutely.
But they're also really interesting, and I like that it's Bryan Cranston's character that discovers the whole thing in the first place, and that's how we get a human into this.
Exactly.
And so I didn't feel the whole movie wishing that I was just watching the monsters fight instead of being with the characters. And I think that movies like the Transformers franchise need to take a cue from this, because this is how you make a movie with a bunch of big creatures in the background duking it out. This is how you make us care about the humans involved.
Exactly.
When I'm watching Transformers and I have to jump back to Sam Witwicky and his stupid life, I find myself thinking, man, I just want to watch the Transformers. Now, it helps in this, of course, that the monsters fighting are not sentient creatures. The Transformers can be your pure human characters because they're people. Basically, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they have minds, and they have something akin to a soul, and they have a consciousness.
Yeah.
These characters don't have that. So if you're watching a movie that's just a slugfest, it doesn't feel like a story, because it's not really about people, and stories are about people. Whatever that means. Whatever people we're talking about. And so this is a human-driven story, but what I'm saying, and the thing that I like so much about it, is that it's not a movie that's just trying to convince me that it's human-driven. It really is. It really manages that character stuff, and it does a really good job with it. There's some really nice character parallels between Bryan Cranston and his son. Bryan Cranston's character lost his wife, and they do this really, I don't want to give too much away, but they do this, there's this great detail about birthdays, and that's paralleled between him and his son, who has his own family, and his son's it's around they do that parallel between those, and I really like that.
It connected the past.
Again, I'm just trying not to throw too many details out.
It connected the past and the present day. It really brought them right together.
But it also gave you kind of a like father, like son sort of thing, and showed you that for those two characters, the important things are the same. I thought that one of the big messages of this movie is learn from history and don't repeat the mistakes of the past. And I thought that it handled that really well. It kind of flips the main crux of the original film on its head, where we're trying to where it's all kind of, you know, anti-nuclear stuff. With this movie, again, try not to give too much away, it ends up being less about trying to destroy the monsters and more about trying to stop ourselves from destroying ourselves in the midst of all this. And yeah, like you said with Kento Watanabe, he's got that great speech about, and you know, you kind of expect it, but he sells it. It's a really good speech. I wish it was longer, actually. He's got this, but no, it's concise. It should be. He's got this great. It's just I want to hear Kento Watanabe talk more because I love that guy, and it's not just because Batman Begins, but Batman Begins does have a lot to do. You cannot lead these men, anyway. But he's got this great speech where he says that you know, mankind, our hubris is about thinking, we have this hubris where we think that we control nature and not the other way around. And that plays out in the film in a really great way. The thing I don't like is, and it's not a perfect film, there's a couple little things here and there, but the big thing is the same thing as yours, and a lot of that, and I will just come right out and say, I mean, like, I'm sorry if this is giving, I don't think this is giving too much away. Bryan Cranston is the character that is not in this film all the way through. And it is mostly the main guy from Kick-Ass's movie. And he is great. It's nice to see him growing up and playing adult characters now. And he's doing great. And so, but it's mostly his movie. The problem is, once Bryan Cranston's character gets taken out of the equation, he is not, we don't have anybody at that emotional intensity. And that's the reason I feel like I have to mention that Bryan Cranston isn't the biggest deal in the film, like the trailers kind of make him out to seem like. I feel like I have to tell people that even maybe before they see it, so they won't be disappointed, because he gives us a fantastic performance.
Absolutely.
But he's just not in the entire movie, and so once he's not a major, you know, player anymore, it just seems like we don't have anybody of that intensity. I could go on about the reasons that his portrayal in Breaking Bad is why he got this role. It's really interesting. It's not like it's the same character. This guy, of course, is a lot more sympathetic, and he's a good person, but he's got this whole thing about doing whatever it takes, and that's very Walter White, and I liked that was there. So anyway, I don't know, all in all, I'm feeling it. What a fun movie. What a fun movie.
Absolutely.
Sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say, you made a good point. The dad was, it takes whatever it takes to get the answers that he's looking for. Yeah. The son has the same thing, and he says it, I'll do whatever it takes. Yeah. When he's going to do his main...
That's your repeated motto throughout the film.
Exactly. And that's good.
And that's kind of...
Glad you mentioned that.
Yeah. There is the biggest complaint I'm hearing about the movie is that it's not enough of Godzilla's movie. Everything I'm reading, a lot of people are saying Godzilla is too in the background, it's too much about these other monsters that Godzilla fights, and maybe I would have felt the same way if I hadn't heard that criticism going in. That's why I hate hearing criticism sometimes before I go in, because it does affect your perceptions and your perspective. But I will say that, having heard that already, I must respectfully disagree. The reason I think it's fine is because, first of all, it's because Godzilla gets a wonderful closing act. It does become about him in the final act.
Absolutely.
You are kind of waiting to finally get to see him for a long time, and when you do see him, it's a glimpse, and then you're kind of waiting to see him again. I think that's on purpose, and I think it's monumentally effective.
It's suspense building, and it works.
I think it works, because I think that it pays off. Every time you get to see him, you get a little bit more of him, he gets cool things to do, and the stuff that he does in the third act in the big giant action set piece is, I think, worth the price of admission.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, like, having to wait for it, it's like not having too much of a good thing. It really is like that. It's like, and I hate to use the word minimalistic, because it's not minimal in an effects way. It's not minimal in, it feels like they didn't have the money to put him on screen as much as they did. It doesn't feel like that. What it feels like is that they know that they're giving you what you want to see. They know that they finally have made a Godzilla that looks like Godzilla and looks fantastic and wonderfully integrated CGI. This is, by the way, maybe the best integrated CGI action picture I have seen in a long time. It might be the best integrated CGI picture I've ever seen.
It's really freaking good.
It's really good. Brandon, I'm going to use the word seamless. I hate that word. I'm going to be because sometimes it's not entirely. I think this is seamless as far as that goes.
There wasn't a spot in this film that I would have said like that doesn't look
real.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't look like those people are really there with those things. They kept impressing me right and left, and not just with the CG, but also with what they chose to do with the action. There were a lot of places where because you get it from the people's perspective. So the people are always investigating things and waiting to see what happens. And whenever they're surprised, I'm surprised.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's hard to do after the sheer number of action pictures we've all seen, right?
It's nice that we're as clueless as the characters are. Like you said, like they don't give us information that we're waiting for the characters to find out. We're finding out with them.
Yeah.
And that's a nice change of pace where sometimes I go to a movie and I think, well, come on, figure it out. I put it together, figure it out. I'm just following them on this one. I could be one of those soldiers myself being like, I don't know what's coming next.
Yeah.
Hard to peg.
Like I said, there's a lot of stuff with action scenes where I was really kind of floored by choices that were made, and a whole lot of just kind of like fun, cringy, ooh man, kind of moments. I also want to say that I am surprised by how accessible this movie is. This is an okay movie to take your kids to. I will say that I was surprised, and I took Jason. I mean, he's 4, and I was kind of I'm not sure. And then there were, and I'm not going to say that everybody's 4-year-olds can handle this. Monsters are scary, and Jason was even a couple points. He looked at me, and he was like, "Dad, that's kind of scary," but. You know, obviously, case by case, whatever you think your kids can handle. But I asked a couple people that went and saw it, you know, is it real gory? Is there a lot of language? Is it going to be too rough for my kid to go to? Because, you know, it's a violent monster picture. Yeah. And I could see them going too far with that stuff. Just trying to be edgy, just being... It's not gratuitous. There's nothing gratuitous in this.
Absolutely not.
And I love that. And in fact, that's one of the things I liked about the giant monster fights is that they didn't feel gratuitous. We always get it from the humorous perspective. There's a moment when Brandon looked over at me and he said, like Godzilla's about to fight something, and Brandon looks. And by the way, the other monsters were really cool too.
They were, and I'm gonna get to that in a second.
Okay, cool. I'll let you run. Brandon looks at me and he says, "We're not gonna get to see that," and then. It's a while, and then we go back, and we do get to see, I think, as much of it as we needed to.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought that was great. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm talking a lot.
In all, that right there was a suspense-building moment that worked.
And it works, yeah.
Because we're seeing, in this particular instance, we're seeing one of the other characters who, she's a lesser main character, but we're seeing her, and we're seeing what's happening to her, and it makes sense that they close that particular door. They close a set of doors, which is what blocks our view. And that's when I looked at you and I...
That's, by the way, in the trailer. Yes. Where you see Godzilla and the door's closed.
Yes,
they put that in the trailer.
The door's closed, and you're like, oh, now we're not going to get to see that? Well, it just makes it that much better when we do get to see it.
Well, and you get a sense that this fight that goes on for a pretty long time went a lot longer.
Oh, absolutely. And they made it work. But what I was going to say is we spent the first part of the movie, like... When we finally get to see Godzilla, yeah, it's great, and it's only for a moment, but we spent the first majority of this movie figuring out what these other monsters are. And their suspense buildup was the fact that when we first see them, they're big, but they're not gigantic. And then they get bigger. Mm-hmm. And the next time we see them, they're bigger, and they're feeding off radiation, and this is mentioned too, and they just they get freaking huge.
And it's nice that we get a mystery like that because they already know what Godzilla is.
Yes.
I think it's also important to mention that this movie is also a lot about secrets, and I think that this is where the modern this is where the modern political and social commentary comes in, and of course I feel like I can't talk about current fiction without bringing up these topics. So you can tell what's on people's minds right now. Mm-hmm. But we're watching. So we're watching a movie that's about secrets, and it's about all of these government cover-ups and things. And I think that it's smart that that it made a mystery out of those other monsters, while the government, at least, and we're talking about multiple governments actually, but that they already knew what Godzilla was. They've just been covering it up all these years, and a lot of this is about, if you keep too much of a secret, if you try to, bury stuff and ignore it, and then that's what causes you a lot of the time to try the same thing you've tried before.
Exactly.
So again, it goes back to that idea of learn from your mistakes.
Well, not only learn from your mistakes, but if you vet other sources, they're going to have different ideas. If your government is keeping something locked, there's only so much you can pull from that source. So you're going to keep doing the same, like you said, keep doing the same things over, because you're asking the same people over and over. Well, what do you want to do? Well, get other outside sources, get their input. You reminded me of something with what you said there. Speaking of seamless integration of CGI, one of the things that I really liked was the very beginning of the movie. The very beginning of the movie, we get a bunch of historical shots of the atom bomb tests in the atolls and the Bikini Islands, and it's wonderful. But we also get our very first, very short glimpse of Godzilla in those, and it looks just like it was actually filmed at the time the rest of those A-bomb tests were filmed.
Well, and I think that some of that footage, and I could be wrong, I think some of that footage they probably just lifted straight from the 54 movie.
Yeah.
Some of the Godzilla stuff, I think they probably did. I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've seen it, but
that'd be cool to find out.
From the very beginning, you can tell just how reverential the movie is to that original source material, and it has that kind of fear. It has that kind of feel of fear and of panic and of this, like, you've got that looming threat. The original movie had that too. It's not like it's just Godzilla fighting things the whole movie with the original either. It's also very I mean, I don't want to say human-driven like this movie is, because I think the characters are a little bit more archetypal than they are in this movie. But it's more, it's more people-driven.
Yeah.
And so with this, you've got, I think, the same kind of atmosphere that you had with that. And so, like, it feels very, like, bleak and desperate, but like I said, it's still something I think you could take your kids to.
Absolutely. And in the bleakness that you are speaking of, we really don't know what's going to happen. More to the point of what we were saying earlier. We're just as clueless as those characters are, so we're kind of feeling it with them.
Yeah, and you're supposed to feel hopeless because during that stuff, because the whole point of it is this is nature fighting back, and we don't know what nature's going to do. But also, we can't even begin to understand Unleashed, and this is, if we play God, it fights back. I thought that it did a really good job of playing on the name Godzilla. That's a thing I'd never really thought about before. When they say Godzilla is basically a god, what they're saying is we played God, and then nature. Not evoking any kind of deity, but nature, the thing that actually, at least the way this movie kind of plays it, rules the world.
Yes.
Sends something godlike after us, and I like that idea. It's like, if you think about how old they tell us that Godzilla is in this, humanity's just a drop in the bucket.
Absolutely.
And we have all this arrogance, and we think that we are the dominant species. And I like this idea of not only can we not control nature, but maybe we're not even really the dominant species. And these other monsters and things, they just stay away from us because up until just now they've been able to get their nutrients and things from someplace else.
Exactly. Well, they called it. So
I don't know. I like all those ideas. Now I want to say, I don't think it's like anti-technology or anything.
No,
I don't think it's that. I think it's just like a lot of these kinds of science fiction ideas. It's respect nature, and nature will respect you. Respect science.
Absolutely. I thought, well, very much this.
Understand the concept, the potential consequences.
This is a multifaceted thing, though, because it's talking about nature in relation to our own technological advancement. I don't want to give anything away, but I thought the EMP element to this was fascinating.
You're right. Yeah,
absolutely. The nuclear,
because that's not
the
just
nuclear
technology.
and the EMP. Yeah, exactly. And it just goes to show what nature can do with all of it. And that's really
that stuff's already the idea.
We're seeing that a lot in reality too.
Built in, and EMPs are a big thing right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of fear about EMPs right now.
Well,
and what they can,
EMPs can come directly from the sun in the form of solar flares. They've knocked us out in the 80s. They literally took out the eastern seaboard at one point. They've wreaked havoc on the west coast before.
And in this, we have a whole lot of power outages, and importantly, they're not just the power goes out, it's EMPs. And they make a big deal out of the fact that it's EMPs, and we see a lot of those consequences that people have been talking about a lot lately in the news that they're afraid of if there was ever an EMP like in a big city or something. I don't know if you've been reading up on this, but it's kind of frightening.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All the science programs are talking about it these days.
In this, we see stuff like the planes falling out of the sky.
Oh, that was
all
so
that stuff.
cool,
yeah.
though.
So, like, the spectacle, man.
How about right before we see the planes fall out of the sky, how about that ominous guy coming through the clouds, hanging on, he jettisoned out, and we're like, where's this guy coming from?
And then,
he jettisoned out of his thing, and you cut to these planes falling, and that was in the trailer, you see the planes falling, but man, that's powerful.
Yeah, it really is. And powerful is a great word because there's so much of that. And again, I am so impressed when I can be surprised by anything in an action movie anymore.
Yeah.
I was on my seat, man. I was transported back to 8 or 9 years old. I mean, like it was great.
It was good.
It felt like the first time I'd seen a movie like this. And I feel like you and I are maybe more positive on this than a couple other folks that I've talked to. And I just think that's really interesting.
Well, it's been a while since I've seen a good movie like this that I couldn't predict some element of.
But yeah, I for one was just really sold all the way through this thing. Now with the human stuff, with the character stuff, I think I was more on board with it in the first act than I was the second act. I think I still cared about everybody involved, but I think that was all. As far as the individual characters involved, the way that they were building their arcs, I think, was a little bit better early on, and then at the end, it became more of kind of a broad idea thing that worked, and that
was a broad idea.
But anyway,
well,
that's the only criticism I'll lob at that.
To your point there, I kind of felt a little bit the same way. I'll give an example without giving anything away. I felt more for the almost orphaned kid than I kind of did for his kid. At the very end, where...
And that makes a lot of sense because we saw that kid in danger.
Yeah, we absolutely did. They make a point of saying that they refer to the sensei's ideas of this monster as an alpha dominant species. I think they use the term alpha to mean, like, this species is way more aggressive than we are. It's so big, how are we even going to hope to get an edge on this creature? And I thought it was fascinating the direction they took with this, which, as you said, was more akin to the original, which I didn't know going in, but I respect that completely.
Anyway, that's all I've got to say about it. Was there anything else we didn't talk about that you wanted to touch on?
Ooh, I don't think so, because we mentioned the visuals, we mentioned the soundtrack, which was great, the sounds that were in this. I think we covered it. Yeah,
I liked how reverential the soundtrack was to the original without just straight up lifting it and stealing stuff. There was a lot of that kind of subtle, creepy Japanese stuff. I liked that the movie dealt with Japan and started there, and then took us appropriately into American places because it's an American-made film, and so they want to go there. But I thought that it did a really good job of meshing those things and going back to the lore, and because this is both for Godzilla and for the characters very much a generational film, and I think they did a really good job of that without going to the silly, stupid, obvious places of let's give Godzilla like a kid or something. You know what I mean? Like they didn't do that.
That's
so
right.
I'm glad they didn't do that. Anyway, well, and I also wanted to mention that I feel like I would be remiss in doing this review without mentioning the '98 Godzilla movie because the flashbacks that open the beginning of this movie with Bryan Cranston's character take place in 1999, and I thought it was really, and I thought it was a missed opportunity to not put them in 1998. That's all I'm saying. I think they should have done that. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. It's really nice to finally get this kind of wash the taste out of our mouth a little bit of that other movie that just didn't really work, and because I don't know, I think a lot of Godzilla fans have wanted to see a really good American-made Godzilla film, and again, like not being a huge fan of that franchise. I was maybe more taken by this than other folks were because I liked a lot of the human elements to it. I'm sure Godzilla fans, nothing against anybody, were probably hoping to see linger more on the monster fights. And I was impressed that I cared enough about the characters involved that I didn't feel like I needed that. That's what I was impressed with.
Absolutely.
So, anyway.
One last thing that I'll say, you mentioned the 1999 thing. This really kind of put time frames in perspective for me. I saw 1999, and then a little bit later in the film, we see 15 years later, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that puts this sometime in the future, and I'm like, wait a second. It's 2014.
Yeah.
It's been 15 years since 1999, and I'm like, no way.
Right.
Totally. Just kind of blows my mind sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you catch up.
I know, right?
Well, anyway, everybody, thanks a lot for watching. We sure appreciate it, and we'd love to know if you saw it, what you felt about the film in the comments below. Also, if there is a movie coming out soon that you'd like us to think about going and reviewing, feel free to leave that in the comments as well, and we will be back with you again really soon. I know it's been a while since we've done one of these. We've been busy with other things, and frankly, the last couple weeks, besides Spider-Man, there hasn't really been much I really felt like we needed to go weigh in on.
They're coming up, though.
We try to see something every week, but like last week, I was just like, there's not really anything that I feel like we need to do. That Wizard of Oz thing came out and it looked horrible, and I'm glad we didn't go there.
I wouldn't have gone.
I've been told that's just the worst thing.
I wouldn't have gone.
Since
Twilight.
If
you're going to go see Return to Oz, go see the 80s version that was based on the second book.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, that's a freaky movie, especially for when I was little and I saw that. That's a freaky movie.
I've still never seen that. I knew that got made, but yeah.
I suggest it.
Well, folks, thanks again. We sure appreciate it. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Brandon.
Do 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 do